questions. When do we begin to worry about fat grams after we are fat adapted to make our body look for the stored fat?
Right. So when you look at the replacement of fat, again, at the beginning of the ketogenic journey, we want the insulin lower. The insulin lower then turns into, if you notice, there's a few very strategic things on that keto continuum. And one of them is that there isn't a timer that's exact on when people become fat adapted. I really do wait for them to say, oh my gosh, I missed a meal. And that accidental, and I know that it's not an accident in everybody, but really that, oh my gosh, I was so busy yesterday, I forgot to eat. Before you're keto adapted, you think that's not possible. You think these people are lying. Like, there's no way I could miss a meal. Everybody thinks about a meal every 3 to 4 hours. That's just what happens. But when the body can recruit fat out of storage and deliver it to the cells that need it, specifically the astrocytes, the brain, and it stays functioning where they don't really get, maybe there was a little waiver of a little something, something, but not enough to distract them into stopping and eating. That process is truly when I start to say, okay, your hormones, and I don't just mean the ghrelin and leptin, which run hunger and appetite drive. I mean cortisol, I mean testosterone, I mean the other adrenal fat adapted or fat built hormones. They are all kind of whimpering around when you're in a high state of inflammation. And when I was trying to not use the word keto, my husband kept saying, you cannot call it a keto diet. Nobody likes the word keto. And everybody thinks it sounds too wonky. This is, of course, in 2015, before the whole world knew what keto was. And I kept saying, well, we could call it an anti-inflammatory diet, because that's really the core of what it's doing. You start out with, what makes you see an internist for the next 30 years or for the last 40 years of your life is this chronic build of inflammation. And when the inflammation is there, next season it's a little higher, and next season it's a little higher. And then they come in and say, Doc, I have arthritis in every joint. My autoimmune is taking out my thyroid. My joints don't work. Everything hurts. We put them on the ketogenic diet, and their inflammation goes from here to here. So they do feel better. But as that ketogenic diet continues, and especially when you really work towards, the level where Tammie repaired nerves, that is really lowering that inflammation at a cellular level. So when they first start on the ketogenic diet, I don't talk anything about the types of fat. I think you can sit there and eat lard all day, or butter, whatever it is you're eating, even if there's some trans fats in it. I know those are the enemies of the state when it comes to the ketogenic diet. It is so much better than the carbs they're eating that I just don't think about, just don't worry about it. Put the blinders on, focus on 20 total carbs. And really, I'm trying to set the chemistry to lower the first layer of inflammation. But then there's other rules. And so as you look at how do you journey through the ketogenic diet, I didn't magically come up with the keto continuum. I studied patients in my clinic that succeeded, and they would move along a continuum. We would keep pushing them to the next level. And sometimes that person that wasn't progressing was so focused that I have to have this much fat, have to have this much fat, have to have this much fat. And they were putting their fat in at 5 meals a day because, I don't know, it felt good. That's what it's keto, it's keto, it's keto. So the amount of fat they were consuming turned into their insulin, their inflammatory rate was still probably only halfway lowered to what you wanted to get it to. So as they progress through a successful ketogenic process, I am always amazed at how well that the process of the human body resets. They'll be at the ketogenic diet for a while. They'll be at an anti-inflammatory rate. They lower things. And the way they're kind of stalled out is their ketones are low. They stop making as much of that fat-based fuel. So that's where you say, oh, that Dr. Bow's ratio in the morning is tanking. It's above 100 again, or maybe it's, your glucose is in the 80s, but you're making 0.4 ketones. So you have a really rotten Dr. Bow's ratio. And that says, oh, you need to stress that metabolism a little bit. And one of the ways that you see early in the ketogenic continuum is, okay, put your meals in 2 buckets. That's where the 2 meals per day. I want you to stay there for at least a week. Most people, it takes them longer than a week to do that. And during that process, what I'm really showing them is there's there's these times of absence, none, zero. And then we put it into 8 hours. And then we point out that that heavy cream in the morning filled with fat is not your friend anymore, even though it was absolutely necessary for the first season for them to get used to. What do you mean I eat all this fat? You know, their body kind of goes like, what? That's blowing their mind for what they've been told. And then once they've got it into 8 hours, then we say, okay, get the coffee clean. If you're going to count your coffee, then your timer starts then. So now your 8 hours was running out at 3 p.m. And that means zip it, no Tic Tacs, no cough drops, no gum, nothing but salt and water after that time. And when I look at, the question is how much fat is too much fat? What you're looking at when you really work through this protocol isn't just to say, oh, get them below 20 and then you stop thinking. No, get them below 20 carbs per day and then you'll stabilize. And then you're going to go to the next level. And as much as fasting sounds like this awful place to be, it is the place our body heals the quickest. And I would never ask anybody to be there until they're truly able to recruit fuel out of their fat and turn it into energy in their, for their brain's purposes, for the body's purposes. And that is not a default. That doesn't just show up happening without you exercising your systems. The other story I like to tell about people eating too much fat is just as a show of hands, raise your hand if you know Sean Baker and his program. Yeah, he's great. I love him. He's also another rebel physician that fought the system. And, if you know his backstory, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is powerful to watch his coaches as they answer questions. And so they've had me on as a guest a couple of times, and one of their coaches was asking about, I get, she was stalled, and I asked what she was doing. She's at 1 meal a day, and she would get to her 1 meal a day, and it was just like gluttony. I mean, she's like, I eat, well, it's only the only time I get to eat in a day. And so she would just eat so much. And she's like, it's not hurting me, is it? I said, well, right. So there is a point where I said, do you know what foie gras is? And maybe I don't say it as French as you're supposed to, but that's that, duck liver or goose liver that's fatty, right? And I'm like, have you ever seen how they make the geese have that fatty of a liver? And if you've seen that, it's an awful scene where they practically put a hose down the goose's neck and fill them full of fat. But it's almost like a gluttonous delivery of fat. And sure enough, it puts that fat into storage in the liver, and we pay high dollar for that foie gras.
One way to get the fat.
Right. And I told this lady, guess what? You do not want to be the goose liver. Okay. Just because you have an hour to eat doesn't mean that you overeat to a gluttonous level. You should be able to eat to a level of satiety or feeling satisfied. And that should feel okay. If you struggle with I just can't feel, I feel satisfied, but then I'm really hungry at about 20 hours. Like, well, then put 2 smaller sections of food and open your eating window back up to 4 hours. Of course, eat a can of sardines at the beginning of those hours, because that fixes all problems. And then that meal later has less levels of just gluttonous consumption of fat, because that isn't really the answer. When I really want to prove to them, when I want to give them like, hey, here's some evidence. You don't need to take my word for it. Check your own fat makeup. And that is to look at that omega-3 test that some of you might know about, where it's an at-home test. You can order it from your physician, but my favorite part about where medicine is going is the best tests, and the people that are leading the industry allow the patients to order their own tests, to collect their own tests at home, mail them in for assessment or evaluation. And when you're studying fat-based things, it's actually very easy, because you can check the skin or the lining of your red blood cells. So this test has you prick your finger and you drip blood onto a sponge, and then the sponge dries, and you register it online and you mail it in. And there's an analysis that says, let me look at those. Your red blood cells are made up of biphospholipid layers of fat. And you can study the strings of fat saying, well, which fats ended up in your red blood cells? And the place those red blood cells got it, which are only 100 days old, maybe 120 if you're real lucky. So they're about 3 months old. So you can say in the last 3 months, how well has this patient been consuming the fats that are linked to a healthy brain, that are linked to a healthy heart? And these studies aren't like the studies they did on statins where they do some funny business with the numbers. They really have a clear connection to the higher the omega-3s are in your cells, the less heart attacks they had. There is a linear response. And sardines have a bunch of omega-3s in them.
Alex, if I could do them, you could do them. You got me doing them. Lance has me doing them. If I can gag them down, so can you. Suck it up, big boy.
A lot of mustard on that.
Mustard's
just not
okay.
enough
Mustard's fine. Put some mayonnaise
Sorry, I
on
didn't
it.
mean to
Smell it.
crash it, but
I'm now making bacon grease mayonnaise to put on my sardines with some celery to dip pork rinds in them to try to get them down.
that Caesar salad
sorry,
must be
it's real.
really good. That's all I can say.
But we literally came down with 20 cans of sardines again.
Oh, that's beautiful. See, honestly, though, if you look at those tests for omega-3, again, I mean, they cost about $100, so it's not cheap. I'm telling you, it is absolutely what I tell my patients to do. If you're looking for the link and you go to bozmd.com, go to Dr. Boz Favorites and you can click on the link. There's a little bit of a discount code there, but they're pretty expensive. So but you don't need to go to the doctor, and you can check yourself and then check yourself again. And I just think that's where medicine's going, is to empower people with these markers that really do improve the outcomes of their health. And it isn't often found in traditional medicine that we're getting some of the best answers. The innovators in medicine, like this company that I'm talking about, is actually, I've shared this story a few times, but I just think it's God helping me. I was trying to find a way to study cholesterol or look at cholesterol fats, because I get this question a lot. Doc, my cholesterol's doing this, 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 and this. And I'm like, oh, cholesterol panels are so messy because it has to do with this plus that minus this and this. They don't measure this. They don't measure that. They add to, okay. So this is a much clearer path saying, what is your level of omega-3? And you can check that in your red blood cells, the skin of your red blood cells. So when I was looking up at these papers and I'm reading about this Dr. Harris and Dr. Harris and Dr. Harris and Dr. Harris, and I'm like, and then I go to look him up, and he lived in my town, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He was on the faculty for the University of South Dakota School of Medicine. I'm like, that Dr. Harris? That Dr. Harris on 12th Street? You're kidding me. He's in my own town. So I just like, oh, I'm going to drive over there and have this long conversation with Dr. Harris. And I did.
Okay.
So anyway, give him all the praise. But if you're looking to the link, I do all of my, I mean, that is where medicine is going. Reward the innovators, put the energy towards the test and check yourself.